Jai Hind and a very warm welcome to all of you. Let's begin the daily current affairs and MCQ series. I hope you all are doing good. Chaliye. So the first article that we are discussing today that again concerns the Ukrainian crisis. Russians have been, offered some sort of confidence building measures by the US and their NATO allies, but the situation still, that is tense. That is, we cannot rule out that this particular area, the Ukraine and the Russia crisis, that is going to be averted, right? Still the signs are there because on the borders you have build up from both the sides, from the side of Ukraine also and from the side of Russia also you have the build up, right? We had discussed in one of the articles here in the previous week also that Russia can be coming or it can be invading if at all the invasion takes place from the northern side or from this southern side, because this land, that is Crimea, is also controlled by the Russians, or from this side, that is the eastern side, which is the separatist controlled area, right? So please bear in mind, you can have a potential question. इस location, जो ये पूरी location है, गेट योर सेल्फ अक्वेंटेड, एटलस उठाओ, अपनी एटलस उठा के उसमें इन एरियाज को बार बार रिवाइज करो, बार बार उनको देखो, राइट, टू गेट योर सेल्फ very much comfortable, very much acquainted with this area, right? Because this has been in news again and again. Fine. So there's another article that says US is going to deploy more troops to Eastern Europe amid Ukraine crisis. So here US has said that since Ukraine, you all must be knowing that Ukraine is not a NATO member, right? Ukraine still is not a part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and hence US is not deploying more troops, or US is not deploying NATO troops to Ukraine, but to the areas which fall in the vicinity of the Ukrainian region, right? There they are going to deploy, or there they are going to increase the number of NATO troops, right? So please bear in mind, NATO is still not a member. So the Ukraine-Russian crisis remains important. NATO, nations, and the latest developments all becomes important from your prelims perspective, right? So certainly, they have offered Russians, the NATO and the US, that whatever arms control and trust building measures they can be undertaken, they must be undertaken so as to enthuse confidence amongst both the sides that none is going to act offensive or none is going to act against the interests for the other side, right? But certainly defense preparedness is being done by both the sides respectively. Apart from that, it is going to help in diffuse the threat of a new Russian offensive against Ukraine. This certainly is something which the world really wants to avert. बिल्कुल भी वर्ल्ड या कोई जितनी भी पावर्स हैं वो ये नहीं चाहते कि यूक्रेन जो है that gets invaded by Russia, and even the Russians would, they will certainly have this thing in mind that the cost of invading Ukraine would certainly be very high, right? Then apart from that, these 2,000 additional troops are being sent to Europe by the US, right? And repositioning another 1,000 from Germany to Romania to ensure robust defense of European NATO members, right? So this is European NATO members which do not include Ukraine, right? So please be very sure about that. No, I don't think that, देखो सिंपल सी बात है, एक चीज है थ्रेट करना, एक चीज है टू up the ante. Up the ante means to raise the stakes. Certainly the Russians have raised the stakes. They have made such unrealistic demands from the US and NATO, right? But certainly before invading Ukraine, they also have this thing very clear in their minds that it is going to have a cost, and that cost is going to be huge, right? ऐसा नहीं होगा कि US जो है वो हाथ पे हाथ धर के बैठा रहेगा, because certainly Biden, President Biden, he really made a flaw within the last week when he said that the US would not mind a minor incursion. और वो प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस में जो वो बयान आया था बाइडन का, उसके within 2 hours of that particular statement by Joe Biden, he again had to come in front of the press and he had to say categorically that no, we are not, US does not mean that we are going to sit back and allow any sort of invasion or incursion by Russia into Ukraine, right? So I don't think that is going to happen anytime soon, or that is going to be allowed. चलिए, so let's take a question now. हाँ जी. Which of the following statements is or are correct in the light of the Ukraine crisis? First, USA has offered to allow Russia to confirm there are no Tomahawk missiles at bases in Romania and Poland. Second, this is subject to the condition that Russia reciprocates with its own transparency measures to this move by the US. And third, the Tomahawk missile is a supersonic cruise missile. Yes. What do you think should be the answer here? Okay, Rohit says B and Rashi says D. Great. Certainly. So look, let's discuss all these statements. The thing which we were talking about, right, the confidence building measures which the US intends to take along with the NATO allies, that certainly has, they have asked these Russians to confirm or to build a mechanism through which they can confirm that there are no Tomahawk missiles present at the US bases in Romania and in Poland. So that is fine. But that is subject to the condition that Russia also reciprocates and it also allows transparency measures. But these Tomahawk missiles, they are, if they are not supersonic, then what are they? They are subsonic. Right. So third is incorrect. So your answer will be 1 and 2, that is option C. Right. Look, when you talk about the speeds, they are measured in the unit that you call as Mach. M-A-C-H. Right. And that is, you have below 1 Mach, which is subsonic. That is below the sound, below the speed of the sound. So this is 0.74 Mach only. That is the subsonic speed at which the Tomahawks operate. Right. Chaliye. So moving to the next article now. That is Hoysala temples in Karnataka finalized as India's nomination for World Heritage List 2022-2023. तो आपके एग्जाम के लिए क्या इंपॉर्टेंट हो जाएगा? एक तो हाउ दी साइट्स आर granted status, the temple architecture of for the Hoysala temples, and mind you, it can be a question for AMC as well, right? The ancient medieval culture part of your, yes, exactly, right? So these temples of Belur, Halibid, and Somnathpuram in Karnataka, they have been, finalized by the Union Culture Ministry for India's nomination for World Heritage List status, right? And the sacred ensembles of the Hoysalas are already on the UNESCO's tentative list since 15th of April 2014. So until this point of time, please be clear that the distinction is that they were on the tentative list. ठीक है, तो अगर मान लो statement आती है that they were already on the UNESCO World Heritage Site list, so that is not the case. It was a tentative list, right? And certainly it is a testimony to the great cultural heritage of this country, of our country, right? Because this is one such criteria, the site which is going to be given this status that must possess some cultural heritage, right? That is how the nominations are done and that is how they are granted the status, right? So let's take a couple of questions. Through that we are going to discuss some of the other things. So which of the following statements is or are correct with respect to Hoysala temples? First, they clearly belong to the Nagara style, seems neither completely Dravida nor Nagara but somewhere in between. Second, they are easily distinguishable from other medieval temples by their highly original star-like ground plans and a profusion of decorative carving. Yes. So which do you think should be the answer here? Okay, Rohit says C. ठीक है, great. ठीक है, Kshitija says B. Okay, so we have B and C, right? Absolutely, this should be incorrect. Why? Because this is not the Nagara style. ठीक है, जब हम बोल रहे हैं कि they are neither completely Dravida nor Nagara but somewhere in between, then that is not obviously called Nagara, that is called Vesara style, right? South India, North India और जो mixture है, right? That is the fusion, or you can say that is the hybrid of the southern and the northern Indian architecture of temples that you called Visara, and that is why this will be incorrect. ठीक है, नागरा की जगह अगर विसारा लिखा होता तो ये डेफिनेशन भी सही होती और ये स्टेटमेंट भी सही होती, है ना? बिल्कुल. दूसरी जो स्टेटमेंट है ये सही है कि these are easily distinguishable from other medieval temples by their highly original star-like ground plans, right, and a profusion of decorative carving. So ये जो टॉप पे अगर आप इसके इनकी इमेज देखोगे ना तो they appear to be star-like, and that is where you are able to distinguish them through their architecture. Yeah, exactly, stellate plane. So यहाँ पे फर्स्ट जो है इनकरेक्ट है, आंसर विल बी बी, दैट इज ओनली द सेकंड स्टेटमेंट हैपेंस टू बी करेक्ट. देखो ओरिजिनल यहाँ जो न्यूज़पेपर आर्टिकल है इसमें भी यहाँ पे इट इज विजिबल, यू कैन सी दैट दिस आर्किटेक्चर हियर दैट इज क्लियरली शोइंग दैट इट इज अ हाइब्रिड, राइट, नीदर नॉर्थ इंडियन नॉर साउथ इंडियन, क्लियर कट ये किसी भी कैटेगरी में नहीं फॉल करता, राइट. चलो, सो मूविंग टू अनदर क्वेश्चन बेस्ड ऑन that is a World Heritage Site status. So, which of the following statements is or are correct regarding a World Heritage Site? First, to obtain the status, a site must bear a unique or at least exceptional testimony to a cultural tradition or to a civilization which is living or which has disappeared. Second, these sites are officially recognized by the United Nations and the UNESCO. And third, India, although is a member of UNESCO but was not a founding member of the same. Yes, so this is regarding the World Heritage Site status. Okay, some are saying C and some are saying D. Right. So those of you who are saying that answer is C, you believe that India was not a founding member of UNESCO. And the ones who are saying C, they are saying that India was a founding member of UNESCO. चलिए ठीक है, देखो ये दोनों स्टेटमेंट सही हैं. that is the criteria basically when you talk about the granting of the status by UNESCO and the UN for the World Heritage Site status. So you have the United Nations and its specialized agency, that is United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, which grant this status. And apart from that, you need to bear some sort of distinctiveness on the cultural front. You need to be associated with, an existing civilization, or maybe a civilization that has disappeared but still with which you bear allegiance, with which you bear resemblance, and which you are displaying, or there's a marked distinctiveness in your architecture for that civilizational aspects, right? So first and second are correct. Third is incorrect. Why? Because India certainly was a founding member for UNESCO. Absolutely, answer is going to be C only. Those of you who have marked C, that is absolutely fine, right? Exactly, Rohit. Chalo, great. So in 1945, it was the year when the UNESCO was formed, and in that year itself, India was a founding member, right? And it is based in Paris, right? Chaliye. So moving to the next article now, that is PM-DAVINE scheme to boost infrastructure, fight against cancer in the northeast. ठीक है, तो अब basically क्या है कि in this union budget itself, this has been announced, this scheme for the development of infrastructure in the northeast Indian region. And apart from that, how is this going to be implemented? This is going to be implemented by the donor. उसके नीचे Northeastern Council, and Northeastern Council जो है is going to ensure that this scheme gets implemented in the northeast for boost to their infrastructure projects. Apart from that, to fight cancer in the northern eastern region, right? And this is going to be in line with the PM Gati Shakti scheme also. Remember, we had already discussed the PM Gati Shakti. I believe that you remember. Yes, PM Gati Shakti के बारे में याद है या भूल गए हो? I believe that you remember that we discussed in one of our previous lectures the PM Gati Shakti scheme at length. ठीक है, great. So what exactly is going to happen here is that along with the central and the state schemes, this PM-DAVINE scheme, that is the Prime Minister's Development Initiative for Northeast region, this is going to complement those developmental schemes, right? And that is going to give a boost to the northeastern region, right? So that is with respect to the PM-DAVINE. Let's take a question now. That is, which of the following statements is or are incorrect with respect to PM-DAVINE? That is, it will be implemented through the Northeastern Council. Second, an amount of rupees 5 crore will be made as an initial allocation for the new scheme. And third, the scheme will subsume all the existing state schemes that were framed earlier for the development of the region. Yes. So please quickly mark your answers. Okay, Kshitija says D and Kavita says A. A, D and C, and we have B also. So that is the diversity which we are having. Okay. ठीक है, काफी आंसर्स आ गए हैं. ग्रेट ग्रेट ग्रेट, वी हैव मैक्सिमम नंबर ऑफ आंसर्स. देखो, पहली बात तो प्लीज बी श्योर, नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न काउंसिल के थ्रू ही इसको जो है इंप्लीमेंट कर रहे हैं, राइट? और साथ ही साथ जो है द मिनिस्ट्री फॉर द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न रीजन डोनर, right, that is also going to be in picture because that is the apex level body for northeastern region, right? So first is absolutely fine, but when you talk about the allocation of money, that is not 5 crore. 5 crore में क्या ही होता है यार, पूरे नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न रीजन की डेवलपमेंट की बात कर रहे हो और 5 करोड़ की बात करोगे तो ऑब्वियसली दैट इज गोइंग टू बी अ जोक ओनली. इट इज 1500 करोड़. ठीक है, सेकंड इज इनकरेक्ट. देन थर्ड, दैट इज इट इज गोइंग टू सबज्यूम द एग्जिस्टिंग स्टेट स्कीम्स. ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. जो एग्जिस्टिंग स्टेट स्कीम्स हैं और जो एग्जिस्टिंग और दूसरी सेंट्रल स्कीम्स हैं, ठीक है, ऑल दोस स्कीम्स आर गोइंग टू बी, दे आर गोइंग टू बी अप एंड रनिंग डिफरेंटली, सेपरेटली, एंड दे आर नॉट गोइंग टू बी सबज्यूम्ड. ठीक है, इसके अंदर कोई भी उनको मिलाने का जो है प्लान नहीं है सरकार का. दे हैव क्लैरिफाइड ऑन दैट, राइट? द मिनिस्ट्री हैज क्लैरिफाइड दैट दे आर गोइंग टू बी रनिंग सेपरेटली, so they are not going to subsume them within the PM-DAVINE. So second and third, they both are false, right? हाँ, exactly शुभांकर, अहाना, exactly. इनिशियल अलॉटमेंट जो है 5 करोड़ में तो क्या ही डेवलप करोगे यार, पूरे रीजन की बात कर रहे हैं, है ना? तो थोड़ा सा उस लेवल से भी सोचो तो लॉजिकल नहीं लगता, राइट? सो आंसर विल बी ए, दैट इज द इनकरेक्ट स्टेटमेंट्स आर सेकंड एंड थर्ड. ठीक है, क्विकली एक बार इसके डिटेल्स को देख लेते हैं कि 1500 करोड़ की एलोकेशन जो है वो दी गई है. इट विल बी, it will fund infrastructure in the spirit of PM Gati Shakti social development projects based on the felt needs of the northeast. ये कंपोनेंट जो है ना, ये इंपॉर्टेंट है. व्हाई? बिकॉज इट इज गोइंग टू बी, देखो सिंपल सी बात है, जिस रीजन को जो डेवलपमेंटल whatever the developmental needs are there, in line with those needs, if you are going to provide for the projects, that is going to help, right? So you need to take into consideration कि उन लोगों की क्या जरूरतें हैं, है ना? चलो, so it will enable livelihood for the youth and for the women, filling in the gaps for various sectors. However, it will not be a substitute for existing central or state schemes, right? चलिए, so moving to the last question for the day, that is, which of the following statements is or are correct in relation to the new global plastics treaty? First, the United Nations Environment Program has drafted it and it will be taken up for discussion by the UNGA later this year. Second, it was released ahead of the second part of the United Nations Environment Assembly 5 in Nairobi, Kenya. And third, consumer brands including Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Unilever and IKEA, who contribute significantly to global plastic pollution, have supported the treaty, right? And you need to mark the correct statement here. Which of the following statements is or are correct in relation to the new global plastics treaty? Okay, Rohit says D. Kavita says C. Shubhankar A. ठीक है, let's just wait for a couple of seconds more so that we can have all the answers here. Okay, great. So we have D as answer, we have C as answer, we have A as answer, but none of that is going to be correct. Why? Because when you talk about the Global Plastics Treaty, that is by the EIA, that this treaty has been, raised up, or they are demanding this treaty. So this is going to be incorrect. UNEP has not drafted it, right? But second is correct, that it was released ahead of the second part of the United Nations Environment Assembly in Nairobi, Kenya, and the consumer brands, which are very much responsible for the bulk of the global plastic pollution. Look, these are the firms which are making or which are minting huge profits, and they are also substantially contributing to the majority of the global plastic pollution. So certainly one good thing is that they have supported such a treaty. They have supported this idea of a global plastics treaty, and that is why second and third are correct, right? So your answer will be B, that is 2 and 3 are correct, right? It has not been drafted by the UNEP, right? Because you have the Environmental Investigation Agency EIA, which has raised this demand that you have to have a global plastics convention, right? And that is where they have said that it is one of the gravest threats to conserving biodiversity, certainly safeguarding human health and stemming the climate emergency. हर count पे आप देखो, this is important, right? And to address this crisis, they say that a global convention on plastic pollution is urgently needed. ठीक है? So we need to eliminate plastic pollution in the environment and create a non-toxic circular economy for plastics, right? That is where this comes into picture. इसके साथ देखो, इस infographic में I've included the cutouts from their website itself, where they talk about 4 basic steps, that is monitoring and reporting for the pollution level of plastics, then plastic pollution prevention, coordination amongst nations and also various other agencies, the various MNCs which are contributing to the global plastic pollution, and the financial and technical support. देखो सिंपल सी बात है, जो लीस्ट डेवलप्ड कंट्रीज हैं या फिर जो डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज हैं, उन लोगों के पास क्या ऑल्टरनेटिव है अगर आप उनको फाइनेंशियल और टेक्निकल असिस्टेंस अवेल नहीं कराओगे, राइट? सो दैट इज वेयर ऑल दीज पिलर्स बिकम इंपॉर्टेंट. ठीक है, तो इससे आपको फॉर्डर मिल जाएगा अपने मेंस एग्जाम के आंसर्स को एनरिच करने का, राइट? सो प्लीज रीड द इंफोग्राफिक केयरफुली वंस अगेन. वेल you'll be getting this in the PDF itself, right? चलिए, so that is the answer is going to be B, right? That is the Environmental Investigation Agency highlighted a new global plastics treaty that takes into account the entire life cycle of plastics, need to be developed urgently, right? I believe this is clear. I hope that this is clear to all of you. This is actually very important, not just from the prelims perspective, also from an analytical perspective of mains also, and even in the the PT also, the board can ask you to deliberate upon or to provide some sort of solution to it, right? Chaliye, so with that we have come to an end of the end of today's session. With that, it's a wrap from my side. I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, stay safe, study well, and Jai Hind.